What's up, guys? I wanted to talk a little bit about the Daytona 500. I don't really do a lot of, this isn't a race review, and on very rare occasion, do I talk about the actual races. I do when there's something out of the ordinary that happens, or something that I consider really interesting to talk about. So obviously, the big elephant in the room is, what the accident with Ryan Newman. So I'm talking about it now because it is confirmed that he's okay as far as being alive. We don't really know. He's in serious condition. We don't know what that any of that means, or how grave his situation is, but he's alive. So we could be thankful for that. So the reason I want to talk about this is because I think that the race today proved almost everything I said in my last, not my last video, but the video I put out last week talking about the problem that NASCAR has with these restrictor plate races, and how I feel these races are outdated and really we don't really need them. Now I said, hey, there's 4 times a year that we go to these races. Can we at least get rid of one each, one at Daytona, one at Talladega? Replace them. People have been asking for other tracks. Some of these other tracks that we haven't been to in a long time. Maybe bring one of those tracks back. If there's some kind of effort to renovate these places, or Rockingham, or it's just there's a lot of places that they can go to, or add another road course, another short track. I'm not really here to get into too deep with that. My point being is that what we saw today, and please I'm going to put the video in the description. Most of you who do follow me, you've seen the video. If you happen to be new, go check it out. And I know there are people that disagree with me on this stuff, but listen to what I say in that video. And I almost felt sick to my stomach at the end of the race, because I literally talked about these things a week ago. Because after the clash that they had last week, that was a massive failure, like in terms of entertainment. And what really spurred me on to talk about it was the reaction from some people. Well, I'm not going to name names or anything. This really isn't the point. The point is that there are people out there that look at these races and say, even if it's a bad race or boring, it's like, but it was still entertaining because of these wrecks. And I said it in that video, and I'll say it again. If that's what you get out of this, if you could sit through 4 hours of a boring conga line race with these wrecks sprinkled throughout, and then you always have these big wrecks at the end, and you walk away saying that was fine by me, I don't know what to say, but I that's not entertainment to me. And I don't find these wrecks as entertaining as some other people do. I don't know, man. I don't understand what people see in it. And I don't think, I mean, I could speak just for myself, right? I can't speak for everyone, but I don't need this. I don't need people risking their life for a stupid race that, and you guys know I'm a hardcore NASCAR fan. I love NASCAR. I'm not attacking NASCAR. I'm not attacking everything. I'm looking at Daytona, Talladega. And I know it's a different animal. It is a completely different race from everything else. And a lot of people keep pushing this narrative that it's so exciting because of the high speeds, and it's not exciting. The race started at 4 o'clock. It ended at 8. There were 2 red flags, which I talked about. And you get these wrecks in between, which I don't think these wrecks they don't feel like entertainment. It's just a mess. To me, it's almost an exclamation point to the problem. If that is all people talk about, that means the race was horrible. How can you find 4 hours of this entertaining? I don't get it. And the race ended exactly like they always do. Because these tracks, by their very nature, produce this type of racing. We've come too far in terms of technology. You can't go back. You can't unwind everything and go back to old technology and these boxy old cars from the 70s and 80s. Aerodynamics now plays too much of a role in these races. And NASCAR, they've tried a dozen different packages. They've tried bigger, smaller restrictor plates, bigger and smaller wings. They put out rules. You can't push in the corners. And yet, you still see pushing in the corners all the time. You can issue all the rules you want. When you put these drivers on this track and you get this type of racing, they're going to push. They're going to block. That's what this type of racing calls for. So I don't really blame anyone in particular. I'm going to talk about a couple of guys that there's just a couple of things I got to get off my chest, and it's just personal. It is personal for me. But besides that, you can't blame any drivers really, because this is what NASCAR does. They put you in this box. Daytona and Talladega, there's only one way to race. Nobody lifts, especially in the last lap. They're not going to lift. Which is why you get this every time at the end of one of these races. There's this massive train wreck. And the only reason people walk away is fucking luck. It's pure luck. Yes, NASCAR deserves credit for all the safety innovations. The safer barriers, the roll cages, the foils and the it's not coming to me. The flaps, all that stuff, right? That breaks up the air and it keeps the cars from flying and flipping. But even with all this tech, you can't predict what's going to happen when these cars make contact at those speeds. You still see cars from time to time go airborne, as we saw today with Ryan Newman. And then once they go off the ground, it doesn't even have to be more than a few inches. When then another car makes contact, all bets are off. Those flaps are not going to help. It's a ping pong. You're a helpless object out there. You're going 200 miles an hour, and once you lose control of that car and the car leaves the ground, even if it's just an inch or two, another car comes and that's it. And I can honestly see a possibility of one day a car flying to a point that it goes over the catch fence into the stands. I know people think that's insane, but if in the past few years we've seen a couple of incidents where those cars get airborne, regardless of all this technology. It's insane. And I know that racing is dangerous. And you can't predict what's going to happen anywhere. You know, people can die anywhere. Even at Martinsville. So I'm not saying that there's only danger at these two tracks. What I am saying is that the danger at these tracks is predictable. If you see something happen at another track, especially a short track or a road course, it's like, you know what, man, it's just one of those things, you know. Not at Daytona and Talladega. The wrecks here happen so often that they actually have a name for it. They call it the big one. You hear it every restrictor plate race. Talladega, Daytona, the duels, the clash, it doesn't matter. They're always talking about the big one. They anticipate it. They know it's coming. They don't know when. And it's the only racetracks that you hear that. Don't you think that's a problem when there's actually a name for this thing? Because it happens so often that it's predictable? That's a problem. And in my last video, that's why I said there's a huge problem. NASCAR doesn't seem like they're going to do anything about it. And another thing that I did fail to mention in the last video is that the reason I talk about this is because these drivers, these owners, they're not talking about it. You know why they don't talk about it? You really think all 40 of these drivers, when this catastrophe of a race is over, that you really think they're all okay with this? You don't think that they're thinking the same thing I'm saying? This is insane. They don't need to be doing this at Daytona and Talladega. These races are outdated, and I personally, I wouldn't lose a bit of sleep if they went away altogether. But I know that's blasphemy. The Daytona 500 and Talladega, these places are historic. You can't even think about walking away from that. Why? Times change. How many people have to get seriously hurt or die before you say, you know what, this happens all the time. We're putting these people in a bad position, and no matter how many times we change the rules package or how many things we introduce, we still get these big wrecks. The racing is still boring. So what the fuck are we doing there? I know, you know, and I know I don't speak for everyone. There's people out there that actually say, I thought the racing was great. Maybe, am I out of my mind? Am I imagining this? I sat here for 4 hours today and it's the same as it always is. As I knew it would be. It's just the nature of these tracks and the way these cars are, the way the technologies come along. The aerodynamics is the number one factor in these races. You can't even win. You can't make passes without somebody pushing. Which is another thing that just takes away a lot of the race aspect to me. To me, it doesn't feel like a race. Ryan Newman should have won the race, but predictably, I knew going into turn 3 and 4, he's too far ahead. These other two clowns are together, and they're pushing each other, and their momentum is too big, and Ryan Newman's going to block. Is he supposed to just get out their way in the last lap of the Daytona 500? Nobody in his situation would lift. And in terms of Hamlin and Blaney, they weren't going to lift either. They're trying to win. So I'm not blaming the drivers. But this is the situation that is created at these tracks. You cannot win any other way. Which is why every fucking race finishes with these big wrecks. And usually these wrecks, these guys get up and walk away. And you get complacent and you get used to it and you're thinking, okay, it's just another typical big bash at the end. But not always. And today, A lot of people were thinking the worst. And I'm telling you, I had a knot in my throat, and it just, my stomach, I felt like I wanted to throw up, because I literally felt queasy. As I'm sitting around, I'm waiting. There's certain little things that, it's like a bad omen. When you see the announcers aren't really saying much. There's no real news from NASCAR. Everything's quiet. Then they go off the air. They show Hamlin celebrating, and which I'll talk about in a minute. And then they just, hey, we don't know anything yet, and stand by or whatever. And then they just, whatever. They go to their regularly scheduled program, and like everyone else, I go online and go, and you're on whatever, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, looking for news, and the news is not coming. And NASCAR says, hey, we don't, until we actually say something, there's nothing official. And then you see a picture on Twitter of the safety crew and all these people with these big walls. They almost look like tents. And the purpose of these tents is so that no one who's not in that circle can see what's happening. That can only mean one thing. The driver's still in this car. They're waiting to pull him out. So naturally, people are going to assume he's dead. Otherwise, news would have already come out that, he was pulled out, he's alive, unconscious, whatever. There was no word, no news, and then you see these pictures pop up on Twitter. So what are people supposed to think? So I was already getting this queasy feeling of, my God, I hope he's not dead, but all signs point to the worst. So thankfully, eventually, 2 hours later, 3 hours, whatever, news finally out. He's alive, serious condition, he'll be alive, but that's all we know, right? So the other thing that of course, it's no secret, there's certain drivers I don't like. And one of those drivers is Denny Hamlin. And I'm not blaming him, okay? It's not his fault the accident happened. But I have to say, every fucking restrictor plate race, there's a handful of guys. It's the same group of guys, always either involved in a wreck or caused a wreck and maybe got out, or just were somewhere in that fucking chain of events. Guys like Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Ricky Stenhouse, and other guys, right? Again, I'm not blaming them, right? This is the situation NASCAR put them in. However, there are guys that are overly aggressive. And that's why these are the same guys always running to the front. It's because they take chances other drivers may not. So, I do think there's a problem with specific drivers being over-aggressive. And when somebody gets hurt or dies, nobody wants to say anything, but that's all I'm going to say. The other thing is, this fucking clown is doing a burnout and celebrating while Ryan Newman is still in his car. Nobody knows if he's okay. And I know what people are saying. I've seen it in the comment sections everywhere. He didn't know. He just won the Daytona 500. He doesn't know if this guy, how is he supposed... You know what? I'm not giving him an excuse. First of all, somebody should have got on that fucking radio and said, hey, don't do any celebrations. Bring the car to victory lane. We don't know if he's hurt, or we don't know what's going on. Just bring the car to victory lane. Let's keep things, somewhat muted until we know something else. But even if nobody got on the radio, common sense as a driver, with what just happened, you don't fucking do that. And people at the racetrack, the word is that a lot of people were booing. Because they're watching this. They're in the stands. They see that Ryan Newman's car is still upside down. There's all these safety people there. There's no word on how he's doing. And this fucking asshole is doing a burnout and celebrating. I'm sorry. And maybe I'm wrong. If you want to say I'm wrong, if you want to criticize me for that, fine. I don't blame him for the accident. I don't blame anybody. That's the product of this type of fucking racing. But I could damn sure blame him for how he decided to celebrate. When one of his colleagues, one of these people that you race with, I find it really hard to believe that he didn't know about this accident. That's impossible for me. That's all I'm going to say about it. And if people want to get upset with that, so be it. Another guy, for these past 2 weeks, Joey Logano, always involved in some shit, over-aggressive driving, in the clash, it's the same group of guys. Just pay attention at these restrictor plate races. It's always the same fucking bunch of guys, over-aggressive, making these fucking crazy moves, and yeah, this is why they end up towards the front, having a chance to win. But you know what? You're playing with people's lives. Again, the people that really need to take some responsibility is NASCAR. And they really seriously need to start looking at walking away from this shit. And I know you guys don't like what I'm saying, but think about what I'm saying. It's not a coincidence. That video I made last week, go watch it, and almost everything I said came to fruition. And honestly, I really feel weird because I even talked about Ryan Newman and how back in the early 2000s, that crazy fucking wreck where his car tumbled like a million times and the fucking parts of the car were flying everywhere. And I mentioned how you see this stuff in the promos a lot. Anything related to Daytona 500, they love to show these wrecks because the racing sucks. That's why they need to use the wrecks as a promotion. Even the 1979, right? What do people know about that? It's Davey Allison. Not Dave. I'm sorry, Bobby Allison and Yarborough in the fucking infield whatever after the race, fist fighting. That's great. Okay, I'm not saying that wasn't cool. That was entertaining. But you know what I'm saying? It's like you don't want these races to be about this shit. You want it to be about the actual racing. You can't even... I don't think anyone can talk about any part of this race that wasn't related to the wrecks that you can say, yeah, remember this guy when he passed this guy on lap 83? And wow, and then he did a slingshot, and nobody remembers anything because what you think about is these two conga lines. That's not entertaining. 4 hours of this shit. And then you get these red flags because of these wrecks. Every year it feels like these races finish far later than they should. I don't know, man. I really don't know what else to say. I'm glad Ryan Newman's okay. And yeah, I told you so. And I know people don't want to hear that. And I don't feel good about that. I don't want to be right about that. I love NASCAR. I love NASCAR racing. But this is shit. And we got 3 more of these fucking races this year. Even if you want to say we can't get rid of the Daytona 500 and Talladega, you got to have a Talladega race because it's Talladega. Even if you want to fight to the bitter end about that, fine. But do we need two of these at each track? Can we just get one of these of each of these tracks to give up one of these races? Then you got two races. You can add one road course. Everybody wants another road course, and then add another, maybe a short track, or maybe a something, between a short track and then maybe a mile, or a mile and a half, something. There's other tracks out there. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. And before I go, one last thing. These drivers and these owners don't say shit about this. They don't want to admit how bad this fucking racing is at these tracks, because NASCAR doesn't allow them to speak their mind. They are very vigilant about what these drivers and owners are allowed to say. And it's been like this for a while. There used to be way back, I remember this gimmick when they were trying something called Boys Have At 'em, or Have At It, where they weren't going to police these guys as much. They were going to let them be themselves. How long did that last? Didn't last long. It was like the blink of an eye in NASCAR. And now, yeah, if you dare say something about these cars, the tracks, or the racing, or NASCAR drops the hammer. So that's why I talk about it, because the fans need to speak up. NASCAR will pay attention. When they start getting complaints from fans or people saying, this sucks, we wouldn't mind seeing other tracks on the schedule. Get this shit's outdated. There was a time where this racing was sort of entertaining. It did have its moment. But just because of nostalgia and history, that's not a good enough reason to keep this shit around. Really. And every year we're talking about, should this track give up a date so we can add this, or this track. But nobody mentions the two worst tracks on the schedule in terms of just racing. This is horrible. I'm curious to know what you guys think. That's all I gotta say. Later.